Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast, the podcast where education meets innovation and leaders like you transform schools into thriving communities. Join us as we guide you through the ever-evolving world of educational leadership, from strategies that inspire your staff to insights that shape your students' futures. We're here to sharpen your skills, amplify your talents, and ignite your impact. So grab your coffee, a notebook, and most importantly, your growth mindset as we embark on a journey to redefine what it means to lead with purpose and passion. This isn't just a podcast, it's professional development. Let's build better schools together, one episode at a time. Now, here's your host, Principal JL. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a first-year administrator? Well, you're in for a real treat today because our guest is Mr. Josh Rowan. He is going to talk to us about being that first-year assistant principal and activities director. Now, Josh is a Lexington, Nebraska native, a University of Nebraska Kearney graduate, and a proud husband and father. In today's show, we're going to explore his powerful, non-traditional path into education, his experiences in the classroom, and what it's like stepping into the assistant principal role. Whether you're new to leadership or just curious about the transition, this one is packed with insight. Now let's get to our conversation with Mr. Josh Rowan. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. Today, I am so excited. I'm going to bring in my good friend, Josh Rowan, to the show. Now, Josh just completed his first year as an assistant principal at Schuyler Community Schools as the assistant principal of Schuyler Middle School and activities director. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Glad to be here.
All right, Josh, I'm going to start you off like I start everybody else off on this show. What inspired you to become an educator?
Mine was not a traditional, this felt like, it did feel like a calling. It just wasn't heard until later on in my life. I went to college initially to be a broadcaster and work in the broadcasting field. I really wanted to do things like ESPN, ABC, things like that. But you have to kind of have, in my opinion, and in things that I've noticed and things that I've kind of worked with in the broadcasting field, there are just certain elements you got to have, and I don't have those. So I decided to go a different route. And for a while after college, I was juggling things around. And then when I worked for my hometown newspaper, I was just in the school. I was a lot of being in the schools and working at football games or basketball games or wrestling meets or conference events and things of that nature, and got to talking to, friends of mine who are teachers, or, Kyle Hayner from Lexington, who was the principal and the AD there for a long time. He kind of got me. He's the one who kind of put the bug in my ear of, you know what, Josh, I think education would be a really good fit for you. And, and just being around the kids and being around the atmosphere of being at those activities and stuff just really is what started it for me. And so then in 2015, 2016, I moved from Kearney over to Lincoln, and that's when I started getting my English endorsement and finished that up. And then I got started at Omaha Burke High School, and it was just off and running from there.
All right. So let's talk about those early years in the classroom as a teacher. What are some takeaways? What are some things you learned as a teacher in that role that helps you today?
You really have to, as an educator and as a administrator, I think the number one common denominator with them are relationships. The relationships are key with everything. It's just at a different level. As a teacher, you're working night and day, working on building those relationships and knowing who your kids are. And being a coach or being a mentor, like a teammate's mentor, or things like that. Those greatly help because the kids see it. And as someone who just basically came in from the workforce to a teaching position, that was something that was hard for me to comprehend at first. It's like you're coming in straight from the workforce, learning how the world of education really works. And it's, the kids, they notice everything. They notice absolutely everything that you do. And so for me, I wanted to try and get involved as much as I could. So I first started, I wanted to be a football coach. That was a huge dream of mine. So I signed up to be a football coach I wasn't able to fulfill it as much as I wanted it to be. I had a baby at the time. So it was for me, felt like a huge undertaking because I just did not have the tools like a teacher toolbox, as they always talk about. I was getting started, so I really didn't feel like I had much of that in there. So I had to dial back a little bit what I was doing and focus more on my craft as a teacher. And I think that greatly helped. And there are way more other things that you can do that shows the kids how important they are to you. Whether you don't have to be a coach, but go to those games. You don't have to be the teacher. You don't have to be the art teacher, but go to their art shows or go to their music shows. When you're present and you're visible and those kids see that you go for them, that's when it makes the biggest difference for your relationships with the kids in the classroom. And I think that's the biggest thing too, as an administrator is, as an activities director, I'm there all the time. When it comes to home events, I'm there. And the kids see that a lot, and again, when the administrators are talking about it the next day, hey, great run last night. Hey, I heard you placed well at your cross country event. Hey, you guys sang really well. You guys played really well at your recital the other night. Me and the principal were both there. You guys sounded great. The kids feed off that. And then it's immediate with them. And so then you start noticing days after days, the kids are like, I'm Mr. Rowan. I'm Mr. Rowan in the hallways. And that's a good feeling is when they acknowledge. It's not necessarily an acknowledgement about, oh, there's the principal. It's a genuine, hi, how are you? Because they know that you're invested in them.
Yeah. I think some things you kind of pointed out there is as a teacher, you got involved with going to activities and seeing the kids and different things. And I think that's really important in that teacher role to do that, because you have those kids in your classroom and you can say, hey, you did a great job at, your basketball game, your volleyball match, your run. I got to watch that. That was really cool. I think when you start that as a teacher, it just naturally comes to you in the principalship because you've already done that. Because we've all seen the teachers that are 8 to 4. They're there from 8 to 4. They don't do nothing extra. They don't go that extra mile, but they're also the ones that struggle the most in the classroom because they're not building the relationships as much. And you don't have to be at every event all the time. It's go to a few here, pick a few out. Go to one event this week, go to a different event the next week, hit every event as much as you can. I know for me as a principal, being a building principal at the building I'm at, I can't be at everything, but I pick and choose. Okay, I'll go to this one this time. So I try to see everybody in something. And I think that's really impactful. And I think that's something that people don't really understand on building relationships with their kids is you're not just building it in the classroom, but you got to build it outside of that classroom setting as well. And even you're going to see them out in the public too, and being able to, say hi and have those genuine conversations are important. So I think that was really, really nice how you kind of talked about how that all that goes together when from teaching into being the principalship. Let's talk about going into that principalship, right? You've been teaching for a little bit. You've taught not just in Nebraska, but you taught also in Iowa, over in the Council Bluffs area. So with that, what inspired you to become an administrator, to say, you know what, I love what I'm doing as a teacher, but I feel like, this is my next step. What inspired that moment?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Being an activities director was something that was already there implanted before I even, once I even got started in the career field. When I started my educational career, I told my wife, I said, when I start, I'm not stopping. I'm going from, I'll be a teacher and I want to teach and I want to be able to learn the ins and outs of being a teacher and things, but I also want to be an administrator. I also want to be an athletic director, like maybe more of a full-time athletic director. Because I'm just I'm very passionate about collegiate sports, but also high school sports, because it's a different environment than the professional world. It is so much more devotion. It's so much more heart, passion in my eyes, where, and fans are so much more dedicated to their hometowns and to into the communities. Schuyler is one big, huge example of what we've accomplished this year. Winning a state championship in soccer brought our community closer together than I have ever seen. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff. No.
Not to mention, you guys beat us in the semifinals at the state tournament, which good for you guys, because you guys are hitting shots that I was like, yeah, that's undefendable. Yeah, you can't defend that shot. And when you guys are making these shots from where you were making them and how they were just bending it like Beckham into that goal, I was like, God, this is Schuyler's year. We had a good team, but you guys were on a different level.
Yeah, phenomenal group. The final four, I mean, it could have been anybody's tournament, but it, and when you have a kid who makes the Sports Center top 10, that just says the level of dedication that those kids put into their season. And so it really just lit a fire into this community. And so that's what's so passionate about for me about being an activities director and stuff. And it's being able to see those things, being able to watch those kids. I was here with my son because, my son was only maybe a week old at the time. So I didn't get to visually see it in person, but I watched it at home when my wife actually had to take the baby from me because I was getting way too into the game. But watching the kids run out onto the field and celebrate with the players, which you're not really supposed to do, but in the moment, in the moment there wasn't anything. Obviously, no one was in any danger. It was just a great it was just a great thing to see for the community, and that it just makes being an AD so much fun, and that's what I love about it. And so, I've had in my middle school kids, we broke 2 track records this year, and those records were over 40 years old. And so, the kids made the paper, the kids were making social media, and people were reaching out, and it was just a big deal. And the kids just ate it up, and they were so excited. And we made a huge deal about it and got their got their batons and stuff and put in the trophy case for them. And it's those little things that those kids see on how you want to make them feel special. And that's when they see that and their faces light up and they get to see their names on the record board and they get to see their names and their pictures in the trophy case. That's what makes it all worth it.
Yeah. So when you went from teacher to become the assistant principal at Schuyler, was it easy? Was it an easy transition for you? Was it something that, you had to get the job? What was that like? How many times did you put your name out there? Kind of what's that process like going from teacher into assistant principalship?
Yeah. So starting when you finally decide that it's time to start making the transition, you just start asking questions and you just start asking people, what are some questions I should be prepared for? Just kind of getting into your head more of thinking like an administrator and thinking more of like, hey, what are some questions I actually need to be ready for? Because obviously the questions as a teacher and the questions as an administrator are vastly different. Because you're going to be relying more on questions about behaviors, and you're going to be questioning more about conflicts between teachers, conflicts between students. You're going to be talking about analyzing data and, how much do you analyze? How much should you be analyzing and things like that. And it's so much different. And so I really started working hard on, building a solid resume and putting things together for my teaching. And, obviously working working at Council Bluffs was a huge step because I also was a part of their leadership academy. So that was something, and that was the first or second, I think only the second class they had ever had there. And I was one of only 4 people that got selected out of the district to be part of it. So that was a huge, I felt like that was a huge win for me. I was very proud of that. It's a lot of work. And, and you and I talked about it a lot when I searched for that first job, because the first one is always the hardest. It is always the hardest to get. The one thing that I can tell people now that are getting into the field and possibly are getting frustrated because they've maybe reached their 6th or 7th interview and still haven't gotten anything and don't understand where they're going wrong. It's just not the right time, and it's just not the right fit. That's the number one thing I can say. It's not because they don't want you. It's because you have to check off the boxes. You have to check off what they want to see in somebody for their district. And so when I finally got this position at Schuyler, those are the things they wanted to see in me. Those are the things they saw in me when they checked off. Is I'm a go-getter. I'm somebody who really is about culture, is about establishing a good culture in a building where, obviously we want learning as the most important thing happening, but we also want kids to be respectful. We also want kids to be accountable for things. We want kids to be able to treat each other with respect, because Schuyler is also a very diverse community. And so we all have to learn to work together, and, we all have to learn to be in class together and being sports together and, be in activities. And we have to learn to adjust to that. And that's, for me, that was never a difficult thing, coming from Lexington and then coming from Omaha and Council Bluffs, all very diverse districts. So it was never an issue for me. But yeah, I went through 12 different interviews through a span of February through probably end of April before I actually got the phone call. And the number one thing that most administrators told me, especially last year at admin days, when they saw me that I was an administrator, obviously the congratulatory and things like that, but they said, "You were a great candidate. You were a great interviewer. It's just that we had somebody who had this instead of this." And so, I mean, it will be frustrating, and it was certainly frustrating towards the end of the road, but it is so worth it when you finally get that phone call from somebody that says, "Hey, call me," or in my case, Terry just texted me and said, "Hey, give me a call back." And I was like, "Oh, this is right. This is actually happening." So it was an exciting time. So, but yeah, it's definitely a process, but you have to be mentally prepared for that transition, because you have to take yourself out of that teaching mindset and put yourself into that principalship role and start thinking of questions of what you would be answering as an administrator.
I think the biggest advice or trick I could give people is take the experiences you have as a teacher and know how you can relate that experience into that principalship. How does this translate into this? How does this skill translate into, student discipline, making decisions, evaluating teachers, different things like that, as you go through those questions? Because if you could take your experiences and show them, "Hey, I can do this job. Here's experiences that are similar," and how you can have them see you in that seat is really spot on. And yes, it takes time. Like you, I probably went on 7, 8, 9 interviews before I got my first principal job. But at the same time, you learn something through every experience that made you better for the next time. So if you are trying to break into being a principal, don't get discouraged. It will happen. Sometimes, like you said, it's not the right time or it's not the right fit. And you want to make sure you're in the right fit when you get that job. Because the worst thing that could happen is be hired and you're not a right fit for that district. That's not a lot of fun for people that I know. I've always been hired decently. So, I fit the districts I've been hired in, but that's why a lot of times you get passed up on, is because they don't see you fit in their district quite the way you may think you fit. But when you do get that job, it all works out really well. So, Josh, let's talk about this past year. You're a first year assistant principal. Let's talk about some highs, some lows. Were you ready? What are some things that, you weren't expecting in the role, but what are some things that, yeah, you went through the leadership academy and those are great and everything, but how did that help you prepare for the job? And just kind of give us a whole summary of your past year as an assistant principal. You can start at the beginning of the year and kind of bring us full circle at the end.
So, I will honestly tell any new principal that what you learn in college, what you learn in any type of leadership academy, any type of, conferences, whatever you go to want to be, before you even become a principal and you start learning about those don't even pale in comparison to the real thing. I'll just say that now, because again, it's a whole different ballgame. It's like any job that you get. They train you and you learn about different things, but when you're actually in the moment and you get to see things in real life, that's when you start figuring out who you are as an administrator. So like even just for a week before the school year started, I moved here to Schuyler middle of July last year because our house sold and closed late. So we got here in the middle of July. So by the time I got here, I was already hitting the ground running. I didn't even have time to unpack my house. I had time to unpack my closet, have my wardrobe ready to go. And I was there in the building the first week, second week I was here. And then that very next week we were off to admin days in Kearney. I mean, it was very fast. So I didn't feel like, for me, I didn't have a lot of time to adjust, but that's on me. Obviously that's just how the life works when your house sells quickly and you have to get there, and then you're already in your office. But that first year is really it's a huge learning curve because you have to get everything established your first year. And so planning, building, establishing how you want to communicate with people, your programs, talking with your coaches about what you expect from them and how you want them to handle things within their programs. And I took over our youth program here in town. That's a building process. That's a good 3 to 5 year building process, because we're getting new things established. We're getting community members established within our programs. We're establishing our varsity programs, where we're getting our players and stuff involved with the kids. I mean, we're really trying to establish a really big community connection with our youth program. And we already have some big community members and programs with our wrestling programs and our soccer programs. But now we're bringing in folks who have done things like football and softball and basketball, and we're getting those implemented as well. Cause our Schuyler girls had one of their better years in 25 years. And so they're wanting to build on that. And so we are trying our best to tap into any of those resources that we know that would work. It really is just a lot about establishing and just preparing for that learning curve, because you think when you first get started and you really think you're communicating, sometimes you feel like you're over communicating. You're not communicating enough. So you really feel like, oh, I felt like I sent this out, or I felt like I communicated this, but really you have to sit down and you have to strategize about who you really want to know this information. Instead of just sending out one email, you have to sit back and say, okay, who all really needs to hear this? Does it need to be our parents? Does it need to be our stakeholders? Does it need to be our business partners, maybe who are sponsoring our boards and stuff at the school? Is this a senior night? So do we just need to contact senior parents? How does senior night work for that? 8th grade graduation at the end of our year. Who do we need to communicate with that? Do we need to contact parents? Do we need to contact, food service? And we need to have something set up for food service at the end of graduation, things like that. It is a lot of communication. And if you don't feel like you communicated enough, communicate more. I mean, send out emails, make phone calls, social media. Social media is a huge aspect of, and it's becoming a huge aspect in any type of school activities. Because parents like to see updates if they can't make games. So they want to see updates on games. They want to see, has anything been canceled due to the weather or due to hot weather, since we're dealing with 100-degree temperatures right now. They want to know everything. And so you have to be strategize how you want that to look. The toughest part for me this year was getting into the classrooms. Because I would say throughout your day as an administrator, I would say anywhere from 80 to 90% of the things that you're handling on a daily basis is behaviors. And so being able to implement a strategy through your, through MTSS or PBIS or whatever type of behavioral strategy or model that you're using in your districts, it's very important to be able to schedule those committees on a weekly basis or a biweekly basis and be able to work with those teachers on those specific students. What interventions are we using and things like that. And it's tough sometimes, but being able to put that kind of things in the classrooms, because sometimes behaviors sometimes are a little bit more minimal than they are office managed behaviors. Those office manager behaviors are like, we have kids that are, about to, have a confrontation in the classroom. Yeah. Those are the moments where definitely need to have an administrator there. So that first year as an administrator is trying to be able to decide what can be handled in the moment at that time or what needs to be put off until maybe at a later point throughout the day or maybe on another day. Because it's very easy to get caught up in those simple things like behaviors or emails or things like that. And then you're getting caught in your office and then you're in your office for 2 hours, 3 hours and you don't even know. And then you've missed 2 or 3 passing periods and and you haven't seen anything happen. So learning that first year was definitely, in my opinion, all administrators are going to do it. They're all going to go through that first year learning curve. There were a lot of highs this year, obviously really getting a chance to learn all the kids and being able to talk with a lot of kids about their stories and getting to meet staff members and getting to talk to them about, differences between, Schuyler and Lexington, which there really isn't a lot, but you get to tell them about, where you're from and how you got there and being able to hear stories about, and sometimes you hear things from teachers that, you may not know, and it connects maybe somewhere in those 6 degrees of separation to your hometown or something. So it gives you an opportunity to learn more about your team and things like that. So that was a really good high point for me, was being able to share some really big highs in my life too, like, the birth of my son and being able to share that with my, my teaching and with my teacher. Sorry. We definitely had some, we had some lows. We definitely had some, some instances that happened at our buildings where we had to have police presence involved and, things like that. And those are scary things, especially as a first year administrator. And those are also big, important things that people will look at you as an administrator. How are you going to handle it? How calm are you in the moment? And so they watch for those types of things. And so, and again, being able to communicate those things clearly to your other staff and to your other administrative team that are out there and things like that. So, yeah, every school year too is going to have those ebbs and flows. They're going to have those high points and low points every year. As a first year administrator though, that's probably where you're going to see the most, is because you're going to see those in the building, but you're also going to feel those highs and lows mentally too. So to answer your question before, did I feel ready? Absolutely not. Mentally, you're never prepared for something like this, but it takes time to adjust. And I'm still adjusting. I'm still working through a lot of it, but it comes with time. I mean, it really comes with time and learning the process of how each district handles those things. So how do you handle getting the cash boxes to your people during home events? Where are you going to station yourself during events to watch for supervision? When do you go make rounds around the building or make rounds around the courts or things like that to make sure kids aren't misbehaving in the building during events? Those are tough things to do because we're only a 2 administrator team at our middle school. So it's, my principal is there as well, and she's doing the same thing. So it takes a lot of working together and making sure we have that well-oiled machine going at all times during those events. Yeah, you're never ready for it, but it just takes time to adjust.
So you kind of hit on a lot of things there I think are really important to kind of bring out. I think, how do you communicate with everybody, not just your staff, but your students, your community members? I think that's a big thing, is understanding how to do that, what to communicate, and the clarity of that communication is also really important. Is there anything that you did like, oh, wait, you had an aha moment, like this is something that if I do it this way, it'll make my job easier? Did you have any of those moments throughout the year?
Oh
If
yeah.
you did, what are they?
Just you have a lot of aha moments. You really learn. Probably the biggest aha moment is you really learn to lean on your administrative assistants in the building, because they are a very crucial piece to how the office runs in that building. So they see everything. They see everything. They've talked with so many administrators. Our 2 they're amazing ladies. They work super hard every day. One that we have there, we kind of consider her the principal secretary. She's been there for 17 years. So she's been there through a number of different administrators and how each one has been different. But she also has a wealth of knowledge of how they've been doing things in the building to kind of help us understand how we want to mold our culture here. So I think for any new administrator, it's very important really to talk to your administrative assistants, getting to know them and getting them to know, or getting them to talk to you about what they've seen, what they've experienced, and kind of what they've seen that has worked. Because I'm sure there were things that she had seen in the last 17 years that probably didn't work so well. But it's all about what's best for kids. And so being able to, again, reach out to those people and reach out to those resources. Because again, people are going to come to you for answers, and sometimes you're not going to have those answers. Mm-hmm. So you have to have those resources you can go to, and those people that you can talk to about the district, about the community, about your sports teams, about your activities and what they've done in the past. So that way you can start to learn more about that.
Yeah, I think that's really a smart thing to do, especially as a first-year principal, is to lean in on your administrative assistants, because like you said, they've been in the building, they kind of seen a lot, especially if you've had one that's been there for a while. They've been through a few other administrators. They can help you understand this is where you're at. And to be honest, they are the backbone of your school, because they are the ones that keep things running so you can do your job. And if you don't have a good administrative assistance, it makes your job a lot harder, a lot more difficult when you don't have someone that's in that role that does a nice job. So, Josh, let's talk about work-life balance in your first year. I know, you're married, you have Ivy, as well as your newborn Graham. Balancing your work and your, just having the baby and family and all that in that first year, what was that like? How did you do that? And do you have any tips for people to help them out with that?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, amazing educational leaders. If you're finding value in this podcast, learning new insights, getting inspired, or just nodding along thinking, yep, I needed that, then why keep it to yourself? Share this podcast with a colleague, a fellow school leader, or a teacher that is inspiring into leadership. Send them a link, post about it, or just casually drop, hey, you need this in your life, the next time you see them. Let's grow this community of game-changing educators together, because great leadership isn't a solo act, it's a movement. Now, back to the show.
I commend my wife so much because there is so much dedication on her part as an administrative wife, because there is a lot of sacrifice that I have to make being away from here, because I can't be here for a lot of times. I'm not going to be here for bedtimes, or I'm not going to be here for dinner times because of events, or if I have meetings or things like that. So I am so grateful because she holds down the fort and does things all the time. And so with our 6-year-old, we finally got ourselves into a good rhythm probably very early on with our 6-year-old, before we found out we were pregnant with our son. But being that our house is only like 2.5 blocks away from the middle school, it makes it so much easier. So we're able to, have a system in place of getting things ready to go and having things ready to go when we get out the door. But with a baby that's coming, obviously with our son, and, this next coming year, things are going to be a little bit different. But little did I know that our babysitter is actually literally the same direction towards the middle school, but it's only like a block and a half. So it's all her and the middle school, our babysitter and our middle school are all on the same street. So I couldn't have written that any better. So that makes it super easy because it's convenient. That kind of makes the hustle and bustle of being a parent of 2 now, makes it a lot easier. It still doesn't take away from the fact that, hey, we've got 2 kids now. So now it's still man-to-man defense, if you want to say that, but which still makes it easier. But still have that adjustment period with Ivy, and she's doing such a good job at that. But it's, that first week, that first month right now of survival mode, you're with the baby night and day. And so my wife and I are doing shifts right now while I'm still finishing up my last week on duty. I'm up by 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I'm out the door by 7:30. And then I during the afternoons, I come home, I give her a chance to take, to rest for a little while. So as I'm getting home from work, so I can spend some time with him. But then I take the night shift. So I'm usually up from, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I go to bed like 12:30, 1 o'clock. So I give her a chance to get some rest, because she does a lot during the day because she's watching 2 kids by herself. So, but that'll change a lot next week when I'm home for a good amount of time, just us 2, and we can kind of figure out how that's going to look, and we'll get ourselves into a better system. But yeah, it's crazy. And, as an administrator, you have to learn, again, as a teacher, there are those things that you do, like if you're a coach, or if you're in committees, or if you're in things like that. Yeah, there are going to be those sacrifices, but as an administrator, it's a different ballgame, because now you have the weight of the entire school there on your shoulders, of how it runs and the culture, and how everything runs is based on how you do it. So, there are going to be nights where I'm there till 7:30, 8 o'clock at a volleyball match, or at a basketball game, or, I may travel to Papillion on a Saturday for state cross country for our middle schoolers. And so those are things that, as an administrative wife, sometimes it's a very sharp adjustment, because you enjoy teaching in the same building as your wife, but then all of a sudden now, boom, my husband's an administrator, and now he's there from 7:30 until at least minimum of 4:30 in the afternoon. So it's a lot different for her. So, but we're making it work, and it's all about, having a good team at home too.
You bet. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, if you have a spouse at home and they are your backbone. They're the people that keep the home going while you're doing your job and being able to do that job. And it's tough. I love being an administrator, but at the same time, there's times where, there is that grind. And when you get into the school year, that's why, having our time off when we have it is nice, because then we can recharge and get ready for the next year. Because right now we're sitting in that time frame where, I got a lot of things already done for next year, but right now I'm in my recharge mode. So when I come back in July, I'll be able to hit the ground running, get some things done, and having a great spouse on by your side is key, within this position. Let's, kind of talk about, you're at the end of your first year of being assistant principal, activities director. What advice would you give somebody that's looking into stepping into their first year as a principal that you wish you would have known previously? That's something that you learned that you would say, hey, this is something I learned. I want to give this advice to you so maybe they won't struggle as much, or something they can learn from you from your first year. What advice would you give to new leaders that are going to step into this role, brand new, starting in this fall?
Well, I think the two most important things that I would tell anybody that's new, the first thing is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go to somebody. Again, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get that position in your hometown. You're not going to be it or in the school building that you work in, so you're not going to be familiar with a lot of people that you come across. You're going to be the new man, or you're going to be the new woman there. And so it's a new environment. It's a whole new, it's a culture shock to say, because you're going into a place and you're going to know nobody. And so don't be afraid to ask questions, get out there and talk to everybody. I tried to, introduce myself to as many people as I could, when I first got here. And I tried to send out like a welcome email to everybody when they hired me. Then when I got everything set up, I sent an email out to our staff and said, hey, I'm super excited to come to, Schuyler Middle School. I can't wait to sit down and talk with you. And things. And I did get some emails back from a couple of teachers, but then I really got to know my teachers once I got here. But it's very important when you get there to know your staff and to know your people. Don't be that. I mean, it's going to feel different, because if you're a teacher for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, once you step into that role, it's going to feel a lot different from the administrative side, because people are going to talk to you and address you so much differently. And you're not going to be prepared for it, because, you feel like hey, we're all in this together. We're all here for the same mission. Yes and no, because now you're an administrator. Now you are the assistant principal. Now you're the principal. People are now coming to you for the answers. People are coming to you to see this ship run at its best. And so it's going to be a different beast. But being able to sit down as a person, and that's what I tried to do when I first got here, was sitting down just as a person and say, hey, I just want to know who you are. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you, even simple things. Are you an avid Husker fan? Do you like video games? Hey, I heard you were a member of the military. Thank you for your service. Those simple things, when they figure those things out, and because teachers will pick up on that quicker than anything, is when they notice that you notice. And so talk to teachers, talk to staff members, talk to your custodial staff, talk to your kitchen staff, because when they see you, again, when I first started and I walked into the cafeteria for the first time, a lot of those kitchen staff ladies came up to me and they're like, can I help you with something? Can I help you find something? Did you not come in the right door? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm the assistant principal. And their eyes just like, they didn't know what to think. And so, yeah, it's very important to be able to talk to those staff members, even the custodial staff, because their jobs are just as important at keeping the school running than as a teacher or as an assistant principal. And then the second thing I will tell people is presence is everything. You when you think of presence, as like, oh, being out in the hallways and watching kids and talking to kids in the hallways as they go to class. It's much more than that. Being out in the hallways, yes, because you want to be out there and helping, patrol the hallways and monitor and keeping the flow and making sure kids aren't being late. But it's walking into classrooms and seeing and being genuinely interested in what those teachers are doing. not just with observations, but just being able to walk in and just say, hey, I'm just stopping in. I want to see what you guys are doing today. And the kids notice that. At events, again, being at events and sometimes going to those statewide events. Our kids qualified for state cross country for middle school. I was there. I wanted to be there. I went up to them. I congratulated them. I wished them luck and everything. And the kids recognize that. And then, because then they approach you on Monday. Hey, I saw you at state cross country. Did you see how I finished? And I said, yeah, I got the results. I saw that. You did great. The kids really pick up on that stuff. So being present, when you think, if you're sitting in your office and there's something that's coming up whether it's like a recital or maybe this teacher emailed you and say, hey, we have this really cool lesson going on this week. We really like you to stop in. And you see that email again and you're like, oh, that teacher emailed me. I can, if you think about it, you should probably do it. Because again, the teacher emailed you wanting you to be there. So that teacher is saying, please be here. The kids really want to show you what they're doing. And so walk into those classrooms, just walk the hallways, talk to the custodial staff when you see them. Talk to the nurse. I got to know the nurse very well. Her office was right next to mine this year. So being able to talk to her and being able to use her as a resource for things is huge, because then you also get to know things about the May 1st rule as an AD. As a teacher, I never really understood it. But once you got there and understood what that May 1st rule does with physicals and things like that, it opened your eyes to a whole bunch of things. So and they can teach you more about the medical side and the health side about being an AD than any doctor can. They're an invaluable tool there. So, it really is amazing to know once you become an administrator, like how many invaluable people you have in your building, from your nurses to your administrative assistants to your kitchen staff, because they'll know things that you would have never thought in a million years. So it's never a bad thing to ask those questions to them. But again, being present there. So all that they see you, wherever it's at, whether it's at lunch duty, whether it's at a PE, whether it's at an event, whether it's at graduation, being present and being there is extremely important.
Wow, Josh, that's a lot of great advice there that people that are stepping in this role. I would really encourage you guys to do those things. Get to know your staff, talk with them, not just your teachers, but your custodial staff, your paras, your nurses, your support staff, your kitchen staff. Those people matter because they're going to pick up on things before you will. They're going to be able to give you information about students or people before you do, because they will see it before you will. And it's really important to have a relationship, because I've had situations where, hey, I saw this kid, does it look so, there might be something going on. Could we check in on them? Boom, And so that's really important to do is, yes, you're there to help your teachers and your students, but everybody in that building is an important piece to that building running smoothly. You talked about your administrative assistants. They're huge. Those are people you want to connect with, that you want to build relationships with, but they will also give you great information to help you transition into that role as a principal. And like you say, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Everybody knows when you're in that first year, you're not going to know everything. Don't pretend to. Don't pretend you know something, because they're going to see through your BS. So ask questions, give yourself time when you don't know something to figure it out, so you can give someone a good answer. So you can give somebody a good information, so you're not just giving them something to get rid of them, but you're giving them something that's actually usable and valuable for them to use. So those are really great pieces of advice that I would encourage people to really do if they're getting ready to head into that first year of being a principal. And so, Josh, this was a great time today. It's hard to believe, man, we're at the end of it. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Is there anything you'd like to say before we end the show?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really think so. I think we've really touched a lot on a lot of important things here, but I've always enjoyed the podcast. I think you really touch on a lot of things that as an educator, but also as a administrator, it's easy for both sides of the fence to be able to watch this podcast and learn a lot about this stuff. And for people who maybe are on the fence about wanting to be an educational leader, this is also a good podcast to listen to be able to say, to give you that boost to get into leadership. Because, just like we need more teachers, we need more educational leaders. Because just like teaching is a extremely hard job, so is being an administrator. And it takes we need those people there that are wanting to be here for our kids.
All right, Josh. Hey, it's great having you on the show. I really appreciate the endorsement of the show. See you down the road, Josh. Talk to you later.
All right. Sounds great, Jeff. Thank you.
What a great episode with Mr. Josh Rowan. His story is a reminder that you don't have to take the traditional path to make transformational impact. If you're a new or aspiring leader, take Josh's words to heart. Lead with intention, stay grounded in your purpose, and don't be afraid to grow. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a colleague, leave a review, and join us the next time for more conversations that empower and inspire the leaders of today and tomorrow. Until next time, be 1% better. Thank you for sticking around to the very end of this episode. I hope this podcast brings value to you as an educational leader. I would invite you to share this podcast with other educational leaders, or maybe that inspiring teacher who would like to be an educational leader someday. I would also invite you to subscribe and to follow this podcast so you can get the most recent updated episodes when they drop. I would also love it if you leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars, because that would make this podcast more discoverable to other educators like yourself. You can also follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, and Substack. All you need to do is look for Principal JO, and boom, there I am. This is where we can continue the conversations from the episodes that you have enjoyed. I am so thankful for you guys for listening. Until next time, always be 1% better.